Right now, in a universe you will never see, there's a version of you who took the job you turned down, who married the person you didn't text back, who's living, this exact second, the life you daydream about at 2 a.m. Sounds like science fiction. Except a growing number of actual physicists think it might be literally true. Stick around, because by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the real psychological trick for stealing what that version of you already knows. Here's what we're doing today. We're going to combine real quantum physics with real psychology to answer one question. What version of you exists in a parallel reality? And what can you actually learn from them? I'm going to show you the actual scientific theory that says parallel yous might exist. Then I'll walk you through real stories. A set of twins separated at birth who somehow lived eerily identical lives. And a handful of decisions so small, they accidentally created two completely different timelines for the people who made them. And at the end, a real psychological framework. One that's backed by actual university research that lets you borrow the mindset of your best possible self starting today. No physics degree required. Let's start with the theory that started all of this. In 1957, a physics grad student named Hugh Everett had an idea so strange his own professors thought it was career suicide. He proposed something called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. The short version: every time reality faces a possible outcome, a coin flip, a decision, a random particle doing one thing instead of another, the universe doesn't pick one, it splits. Both outcomes happen, just in separate, non-communicating branches of reality. And here's the part that should genuinely mess with you. Under this theory, it's not just particles that split. Every decision you've ever made, every job you didn't take, every relationship you walked away from, theoretically created a branch where you chose differently. Now, to be fair, this is still a debated interpretation, not a proven fact. Plenty of serious physicists disagree with it. But it's taken seriously enough that it's taught in actual graduate physics programs, not just late-night YouTube rabbit holes. So if even a fraction of this is true, somewhere out there is a version of you who said yes instead of no. And weirdly, Hollywood figured out how emotionally powerful that idea is decades before physicists started taking it seriously. Think about it. Some of the most beloved movies of the last 30 years are built entirely on this one idea. There's the late 90s film about a woman whose entire life splits into two different timelines based on one thing. Whether she catches a specific train, miss it, and she comes home to heartbreak. Catch it, and her whole future changes. Same woman, two completely different lives running side by side. Then there's the Multiverse blockbuster that swept the Oscars a few years back. A laundromat owner who discovers she can jump into the lives of every version of herself across infinite realities, including ones where she became a movie star, a chef, even a rock. Here's why these movies hit so hard emotionally, according to psychologists who study this. They tap into something called counterfactual thinking. Our brain's automatic habit of imagining what-if scenarios about our own life. It's one of the most universal human experiences there is. Everyone, at some point, has laid awake replaying a decision. But here's the twist. This isn't just idle daydreaming. Scientists have actually studied people who lived out a real-life version of the two timelines idea. And the results are stranger than the movies. In 1979, researchers stumbled onto a case that looked almost fictional. Two identical twin brothers had been separated at birth and adopted by two completely different families in two different towns who had zero contact with each other. Neither brother knew the other existed until they were reunited at age 39. Here's where it gets genuinely bizarre. Both families, independently, with no knowledge of each other, had named their sons James. But it didn't stop there. Both men had married a woman named Linda, divorced her, and remarried a woman named Betty. Both had sons, one named James Allen, the other James Allen. Both drove the same model of car. Both vacationed at the same beach in Florida. Both had worked part-time as sheriff's deputies. Researchers at the University of Minnesota ended up studying dozens of twin pairs separated at birth specifically because of this case, in what became known as the Minnesota Twin Study, one of the most cited studies in behavioral genetics. The takeaway wasn't twins are psychic. It's something almost weirder. Genetics load the dice on personality, preferences, and even life patterns way more than we like to admit. Meaning your alternate universe self, even in a totally different environment, might end up shockingly similar to you in some ways. But other twin pairs in the same study ended up living completely different lives. Different careers, different values, different outcomes entirely. Same starting DNA, wildly different result. So what actually creates the split? Turns out, it's rarely the big dramatic moment. It's usually something tiny, and the next few stories will genuinely make you paranoid about your own small decisions. In 1962, a record label executive sat through an audition for a scrappy four-piece band from Liverpool. He passed. His reported reasoning at the time: guitar groups were on their way out. That band was the Beatles. That label was Decca Records. And Decca has been cited in music history ever since as the company that turned down one of the best-selling acts of all time. Now here's a modern version that's honestly even more painful. In the late 1990s, two Stanford students tried to sell their search engine technology to an established company called Excite for around $1 million, so they could go back to focusing on their PhDs. Excite passed. Those two students kept building it themselves instead. Their company's name? Google. Think about that for a second. One meeting. One no thanks. And an entire alternate timeline of the internet. One where Excite, not Google, becomes the dominant search engine of the 21st century, quietly closes forever. This is what researchers call path dependence. The idea that small, almost forgettable decisions lock in enormous downstream consequences. And once that path is chosen, going back becomes nearly impossible. And here's the uncomfortable question this raises about your own life. What's your version of that meeting? The job posting you scrolled past? The message you didn't send? Somewhere, statistically, a version of you said yes. So if these alternate versions of us really are out there, is there actually a way to access what they know? Turns out, psychologists have been quietly working on exactly that. In 1986, two psychologists, Hazel Marcus and Paula Nurius, published a theory that, and I promise this isn't an exaggeration, is basically the academic version of everything we've been talking about. It's called possible selves theory. The idea is that your self-concept isn't just who you are right now. It's made up of multiple imagined versions of yourself. Your hoped-for self, your feared self, your if things had gone differently self. And all of them are quietly shaping your decisions today, whether you notice it or not. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Researchers have found that people who can vividly, specifically picture their ideal possible self are significantly more likely to actually take the actions that get them there. Better savings habits, healthier routines, bigger career moves, compared to people who only think about their goals in vague terms. There's actual neuroscience backing this up, too. A researcher at NYU named Hal Hirschfield ran brain imaging studies and found something wild. When most people think about their future self, their brain activity looks almost identical to when they're thinking about a complete stranger. That's a problem, because the less connected your brain feels to that future version of you, the easier it is to make choices that hurt them. Skipping the savings deposit, skipping the workout, taking the easy option today at their expense. So here's the wild reframe. Your alternate universe self everyone loves to romanticize in movies isn't some fantasy in a parallel dimension. Psychologically speaking, it's just your possible self. And the closer you feel to that version of you, the more likely you are to actually become them. Which brings us to the one decision-making trick that ties this entire video together. In 1994, a hedge fund employee was trying to decide whether to quit his stable, high-paying Wall Street job to start an online bookstore. Everyone around him thought he was insane. So he built a mental model to force the decision. He imagined himself at 80 years old, looking back on his life, and asked one question: which choice would I regret more? Trying this and failing, or never trying at all? He figured he'd barely think about the failed startup at 80, but he knew he'd never stop thinking about not trying. So he quit. That employee was Jeff Bezos. That bookstore became Amazon. This is officially called the regret minimization framework, and it's basically a shortcut to consulting your alternate universe self directly. Instead of imagining a parallel dimension, you imagine your own future timeline and ask which branch you'd actually be proud of. Here's how you actually use it, starting today. Step 1. Pick the decision you keep avoiding. The job application, the conversation, the move. That's your fork in the road. Step 2. Fast forward. Imagine yourself decades from now looking back. Not tomorrow you, not next year you. Old, done with it, looking back you. Step 3. Ask which version of this decision that future self is proud of, and take one small action today that moves you toward it. That's it. That's genuinely the whole trick. You don't need a parallel universe. You need to stop treating your future self like a stranger and start making decisions like you're already on a first-name basis with them. So here's what I want you to sit with. Whether or not there's actually a version of you out there in a real parallel universe living your dream life, the physics is still debated, remember. The psychology part is not up for debate. Your brain is already building a version of your future self every single day, in every decision you make. The only real question is whether you're building someone you'd actually want to meet. So tell me, what's the one decision you've been putting off? The one your 80-year-old self is already quietly judging you for? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, half the reason I make these videos is to see what you all admit to down there. And if this got you spiraling a little, in a good way, you need to watch this next one. It's about the psychology trick people are using to basically time travel their own habits. Right here. Go.